Unless you've been sleeping under a rock for the past month, you're undoubtedly aware of the flag protests. In case you don't know, I'll give you a quick rundown. On the 3rd of December 2012, Belfast City Council voted to restrict the number of days the Union flag would fly over Belfast City Hall, in line with the rest of the UK. Within minutes, violence erupted and the protests have been ongoing. The vote was carried by the Alliance Party, a moderate unionist party which has now become the target of violence and abuse. These protests raise three important questions to me. Firstly, are these protests simply about flags? Or are there other issues at play here? Second, do these protests represent legitimate or justifiable civil disobedience? And third, is our current power-sharing executive equipped to handle the situation? With regards to the first question, the simple answer is no. These protests are about more than flags. Many commentators are seeing these protests as the culmination of a sentiment within loyalism that they have gained nothing from the peace settlement, while their Republican counterparts have got all the benefits. Like many things, the truth lies somewhere in the middle. While equality legislation and the PSNI's 50-50 rule, for example, may have increased competition for jobs, these are not the root cause of loyalist disenfranchisement. The truth is, the two largest unionist parties, the DUP and the UUP, no longer represent working class loyalism. Both parties now have a broadly middle class agenda, meaning that loyalists have no mainstream political representation. Loyalist perceptions have emerged from the current realpolitik, not the framework of the Good Friday Agreement itself. To understand whether or not the protests represent justifiable civil disobedience, it's important to understand what civil disobedience is. Civil disobedience is when a group of people who feel excluded or disadvantaged by the current political establishment break laws with the aim of drawing attention to their cause and changing laws to create a more just society. Movements such as the Civil Rights Movement in America were justifiable because the political establishment allowed for discrimination against African Americans who could not mobilize for elections to national office due to the sheer size of America and the finance needed to campaign effectively. Thus, civil disobedience was the only option available to these communities. On the other hand, Northern Ireland is a very small state, and a grassroots movement seeking election would not be nearly as difficult to organise. Also, as stated before, it is not the long-term political establishment creating the perceived marginalisation of loyalist communities, but rather the parties in office, which regular elections allow to be changed. Thus, I don't consider these protests to be justifiable civil disobedience, as there are other options available to the loyalist communities. The third question is perhaps the most important. Is our power-sharing executive equipped to deal with this scenario? Ideally, all of the parties would sit down for rational discussion resulting in a collective decision being reached. But what has happened? The two unionist parties have retreated into private talks with loyalist paramilitary leaders after having previously distributed leaflets inciting the protest to begin with. Meanwhile, nationalist parties have done little but sling dirt at the unionists over the forum instead of trying to actively bring them to the table. The unionist parties are, however, more at fault. What started as a political prank by Peter Robinson to get his Westminster seat back off Naomi Long has grown into a much greater political monster. The responsibility for trying to take serious leadership of this crisis is his and his clones, but neither wants to admit that. Thank you. Please, if you liked what you heard, please hit like, leave a comment, and feel free to subscribe.